Hi, welcome to the Healing Medicine Show. We produce this show on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central Time as part of the Healing Medicine newsletter. The vision for this show is to provide a platform for health and healing professionals to grow in their understanding and practice of what it means to be healers. We aim to provide healthcare professionals with resources and inspiration for both personal and professional development practices, especially those rooted in holistic health. We believe that the change in healthcare starts by focusing on the health and well-being of the healthcare professional. If you have a colleague who would enjoy this show, please send them the link to subscribe to this newsletter. So my name is Dr. Blair Thielemeyer. I am a doctor of pharmacy, and I work with pharmacists to create innovative new business models through the Pharmapreneur Academy. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our special guest, Frank Benedetto. He's a doctorate of physical therapy, also a strength and nutrition coach. He has built and sold a multiple location clinic, and today is running a hybrid digital business incubator for movement professionals, and also invests and strategically advises for business owners in that space. So Frank, thank you so much for joining us here today, and we are so excited to have you.
Blair, thank you for having me. It means a lot to speak to your community. I don't take that lightly. I'm going to do everything I can to provide as much value as possible in these next 30 or so minutes.
Absolutely. So I want to start off this interview the same way we start off all of our Healing Medicine Show interviews, which is by asking you, what does healing mean to you?
What does healing mean to me? Healing is the inner work. Healing is the pivoting away from the societal norm of where we could place blame, where we, especially here in healthcare, getting obsessed with things like the insurance companies and the system and all these valid reasons why we are in this position that we are in, and starting to accept that the very first step in changing the system is looking inward and healing ourselves. And, to use a cliche, maybe overplayed analogy, it's to start putting the oxygen mask on so that we can finally start to, really work on the systemic issues at hand here in healthcare.
Absolutely. I think, we had kind of talked about this before we started recording, how easy it is to kind of get caught in this echo chamber of your industry. So me in pharmacy, you in physical therapy, of feeling kind of helpless and feeling a little powerless over how we are practicing our craft and what that career trajectory looks like. So both you and I have made those shifts to really reinvent ourselves. And I think helping professionals to see themselves as healers, to see themselves in a new way has really been helpful in and empowering people to think about, well, if I'm truly focused on healing medicine, how would I practice differently? How would I show up differently? And it does take a lot of that inner work. So I'd love to ask you, a little bit more about your own story and what kind of healing maybe needs to take place for healthcare professionals.
Yeah, I'll start with the latter because it's a shorter answer, and then I'll go into my story. I believe that while we have been victimized as healthcare professionals, we are victims of the current system. But that doesn't mean that we need to adopt and accept a victim mentality and carry that with us the rest of our lives. And I think that it's time to take a good hard look in the mirror as healthcare providers and all the different, the niches, the same thing that pharmacists are going through, the same thing physical therapists and chiropractors and DOs and NPs, we're all going through the same universal experience. And some are beaten down by that experience to the point where they are empty and numb. And some seemingly come out of that experience fueled with a new fire to drive the new way of healthcare. And my story is one where I did get beat down and I sunk unimaginably low. I actually, when I look back, I can't believe sometimes that it is even my story. When I tell it, I almost, it's jarring to hear sometimes because I don't tell it as often anymore because we're usually looking forward. But I think that for the intention of your audience and the change you're trying to make, I do think that there will be some valuable lessons in hearing my story. I had every head start you could possibly imagine in life. At 23, I graduated with my doctorate in physical therapy. I had known very early what I wanted to do. Started college at 17, did an accelerated program where I had my bachelor's degree in psychology and my doctorate all under my belt at 23, 6 years. At 26, I had no student loans. I had been married. I had 2 kids, had a house, and pretty good job. Lots of one-on-one time with my clients, which was really rare in the physical therapy space. Yet deep down was empty. And what made it extra confusing is that I had it the best in comparison to a lot of my colleagues. So I had one-on-one time. That was the metric that was the be-all and end-all metric. As a physical therapist, especially, I got 45 minutes with each client. How dare you complain? How dare you burn out? There must be something wrong with you. And I was just fighting through it. Honestly, I was ignoring it, and I was sinking deeper and deeper. And then tragedy struck when my father passed away unexpectedly in front of me from a heart attack at the age of 64. And I imploded my life over the next 3 years. And it was a combination of, yes, the trauma that I experienced from witnessing that, but as I sorted through it, and now with the clarity I have a decade later since his passing, a huge part of it was the mourning of the regret of the way I had lived in his last years. I had seen him so incredibly little, and he lived 4 miles, less than 4 miles away. I had 3 days a week where I'd leave for work before my kids woke up and was home after they went to sleep. And that huge head start I had blown in every way possible. So I went down a path of escapism, which then ended up involving drugs and alcohol abuse, and it was a really hard, long fall until my 30th birthday. On my 30th birthday, I had woke up, and I think we have these ideas or pictures of landmark years, right? That they're just, we have 30 is a particular one because you're transitioning out of this, seemingly at that age, your youth in your 20s. Now, okay, I have this vision of who I'm going to be at 30. And I woke up that day realizing I was the exact opposite. And that year leading up to my 30th birthday, I had known that I was burnt out beyond belief, beyond words. I was doing the best I could for my clients, my patients, but I was struggling deeply, and I wanted out of healthcare. I had tried and failed to launch several businesses that had nothing to do with healthcare. One, I launched a drone business, never had a single customer there. Drones were just coming out, and I was like, oh my God, this thing's huge. I launched a personal training staffing business, trying to match trainers with gyms, like through a Tinder-like app where the two could swipe and match each other. Didn't realize how much apps cost. That didn't even get off the ground. I had, phone charger business where we were going to try to get these, vending machines. That was way before that was really thing. So these were good ideas that I had absolutely no ability to execute on. And it was almost through, I was relegated to say, okay, I guess I have to figure this out by using my actual skill set. And that day on my 30th birthday, I happened upon a motivational video. It was by Eric Thomas. And every single word just spoke to me. I won't do any justice trying to replicate it because no one speaks the way that man does. And he basically outlined my life up into that moment and said, this year is the year I'm going to make my goal become a reality. I won't talk about it anymore. And you start screaming, I can. And I vowed that day that the next year was the year that I was going to reinvent my career. And in the process, through the vehicle of business, save my life in the process. And I did. 30 days later, I launched my first business with my co-founder, who's still my co-founder today now in all my ventures. He's more like brother to me, Cedric. And we made 1.1 million in our first year. We continued to scale until we were in multiple millions, and we were able to sell just under the 5-year mark just before COVID, thank God, because we were an in-person, high quality, low volume practice for physical therapists that might have been challenged in the COVID years. And it was through that business really was rooted deeply in a mission. And that mission saved me. The mission is what breathed a new energy into my life. And I still look back and I don't know how I tuned into that mission from this dark place. I had some intuitive higher self moment that said, you can't do this for you. If it's for you, it'll fail. It needs to be for the sake of a mission, yet also for you, not a martyr, but mission driven. And it was through that business that I had healed myself.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing. A couple things that really resonated with me was this guilt, comparing trauma of and the things that you were struggling with, someone else has it so much worse. I shouldn't be complaining about this. I should be happy. I hate that word should. We put so much pressure on, I should be doing this because I achieved everything that I was supposed to achieve, and yet I'm still not happy. So I must be the issue, and I should just get through it and struggle through it in silence. And I think a lot of healthcare professionals, especially because we're highly trained, we think I know exactly what's wrong with me. But how do we get to a place where we can really talk about our struggles in a constructive way, not just continuing the rhetoric around how helpless we feel. And so I love that you talked about this mission being the thing that was able to kind of pull you from that place. And I really resonate with that because losing that victim mentality and connecting it and replacing it with a sense of purpose, a sense of this is what meaningful, purposeful work can actually look like. For me, that's always been advancing the profession of pharmacy. And part of that is kind of disrupting the idea that pharmacists have to be so connected to the medications, whereas in reality, most of the people I work with are like, how do we get you off of your medications? How do we focus on true health? So I really connected with several things there. And also the overachieving mentality of healthcare professionals is a theme that has been recurring, that I had the plan, I worked the plan, I got to the end of the plan, and I graduated, and then I went out and the work was not at all what I expected it to be. And how do we recover from that? So I think it's really interesting, your story and how that mission was able to pull you forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I would say is that the starting point is acknowledging that we in healthcare have attenuated to extraordinarily low expectations and have rationalized staying in conditions that are completely unacceptable. So there's this groupthink that's happening where we look to our left, we look to our right, and every pharmacist we know is overworked and underpaid and burning out. Therefore, this is normal. Therefore, what's the point of speaking up? And it is dangerous when a critical mass of society starts to behave that way. And we've well beyond surpassed that critical mass. It takes about 25% of any subgroup of people to think and act a certain way to create a tipping point in which it inadvertently influences the rest of the community. And we have now moved into a herd-like groupthink of accepting these conditions and also accepting that we are powerless in those conditions. And as a result, we now are personally, most people in healthcare are living a normalized purposelessness in their life. And that, I believe, is one of the most dangerous things, because without going into detail, my father was a police officer, but one of the reasons why he died, there's two that I've identified. He was forced out of retirement, which was a political-based thing, and he had a lack of purpose. I watched this bold man who had led task force to break up crime rings and gangs and serial killers. He did some really crazy stuff in his career, be relegated to the couch, and he never found his purpose again. and seeing that transition, and in the process of me coming to acceptance around his passing, I recognize that a lot of people have already died already because they have given up that their life can possibly have any purpose. And sometimes that purpose is just rooted in the locus of a family, which that for some people, that is is their life's purpose. But for many of us, we have two parallel purposes in our hearts, a professional and a personal. And the best lives are when those two are not just non-competing, but help each other flourish. And the second reason, I just feel compelled to share this because of the audience. The second reason is that he was prescribed a medication that he should not have been. That is actually he was prescribed a Z-Pak, and he was an active cardiac patient, and there's some known literature around that.
QT prolongation, yeah.
So what we need, and what I advocate for, is that, and this is going to sound harsh, but I do think that we as healthcare, part of my role in healthcare is twofold, threefold. One, harsh wake up call, because I needed one, and it took my dad dying in front of me and years of escapism for me to finally hit rock bottom and get slapped in the face. I love helping people stop the fall and not need to hit rock bottom. So here's your slap in the face. If you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And there is a shaming to that. That is negative. That is hard to hear. But there is truth to it too. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go and quit your job tomorrow. That doesn't mean that you have to self-sacrifice and make your family suffer and not make money. But it does mean that you at least need to start thinking about, just taking the first step and thinking about, how could I do this differently? How can I contribute? Means you are now part of the solution. So good news. If that hurt, if that felt like a little unfair, all you need to do is, after this podcast, put 30 minutes on your calendar to think about what you could do next, what you could do differently, the conversation you're avoiding having with your boss, rallying your coworkers to speak up, banding with a group of friends from college to talk about what we could all do, contributing to your professional society, contributing to joining a program that helps you reimagine how you do your career, something. Because for every person who doesn't do that, another person ends up like my father.
Absolutely. I think that really seeing ourselves as something different. So I talk a lot about identity shifts and the identity shifts that need to take place for us to see ourselves as healers instead of just healthcare professionals. And part of that comes with having more conversations with our patients and taking an honest look at ourselves. How are we walking the walk? How are we intentionally designing our personal and professional lives around our values and what we believe? And I think that there is a values issue in healthcare that is not talked about a lot, because there's a lot of value around profitability and volume. And we talk about patient care and ways to improve patient care, but I think it's clear to many of us that the investment in patient care and in improving how the relationships with patients is not reimbursable. It's not really, it's lip service saying that what we're doing is in the best interest of the patient, because I think we know as healthcare professionals that there's so much more that we could be doing for our patients.
Absolutely. And there are real barriers. So it's important to realize that there is a mindset issue that needs to be overcome, which is the spark. But then we also need a new engine and a new vehicle. The new engine and new vehicle is useless if you're emotionally dead inside. So we need to spark. Now we need a new vehicle. And luckily we can pull from other industries for inspiration of how. So the disruption of almost every industry starts with higher priced products that are less scalable. And over time, as long as enough people are working towards demonetization, then the dissemination of those products over time. So the classic example is Uber now, which is soon going to be not true anymore because Uber is now getting expensive because their model is breaking. But the general concept of 20, 30 years ago, who had a driver? Who could get you guessed a neighbor, you asked a friend, you did not hire a driver. And if you did, that meant you came from a pretty well-off family and you were, making an excess amount of money. And how much did a driver cost in relative to the amount of income a person's making? A significant amount. And over time, then taxis came around. Okay, that was another level. And now then Uber came around, and for $5, $10, $20, depending on where you live, you can now demonetized the notion of a private driver. The same process does need to happen in healthcare, in my opinion. And this is where the next sticking point usually occurs, because none of us, especially they're attracted to, I believe, your audience or my audience, none of us just want to serve wealthy people for the rest of our lives, selling extraordinarily high ticket packages to wealthy people for some sort of concierge type healthcare. There's nothing wrong with that model. That might be what some of you are called to do. There is going to be a place for that. But if that's all we do, we will then have two classes of healthcare, the current one and then this new one. What we need is enough people to maybe start in this higher ticket realm, because that's the lifeblood for you and your business, to no longer now be trapped in the current sick care model. So you get your oxygen mask on monetarily, you fund your life, you fund your business. And then through the process of emerging technology, which continues to accelerate at rapid levels, millions upon millions of dollars have been spent in platforms to package our professional skill sets. You don't need an app. You could pay $100 a month for an app that someone put $10 million into to package your unique skill set and approach to healthcare or medicine. And over time, be thinking, how do I make this more affordable and ideally even more effective through the use of technology? And you can still keep your price tiers. So maybe there is a mechanism where it is a higher touch thing and a middle, but I'm imagining, in 10, 20 years from now, what healthcare should look like is also not just, but also an array of apps for $9 a month and $10 a month and $100 a month that can really be the advocate at scale that most people need on the preventative side of healthcare or at the early intervention side of healthcare. So for example, let's say diabetes, I think, is a massive one, where what's the actual only intervention on early stage diabetes? Behavior change. Behavior change is wildly complex. It requires daily accountability. It requires an in-depth understanding of psychology and modeling environment and family, friend support. These are things that are really well served to maybe not be the $10 app, but be something where there's not just a one-time consult and a pamphlet that says eat healthy, come back in 6 months. If you're not better, we're putting you on meds. But instead, I'd like you to meet my diabetes expert who is going to be in your corner to help you avoid needing those meds. You're going to meet with him or her once every 2 weeks and have asynchronous communication inside an app in between. And there's a behavior tracker and personalized exercise from a physical therapist or strength coach. And and you can just imagine now this ecosystem that's created specifically for diabetics, who has this high touch concierge thing, that we'll order your groceries for you. You don't even need to do anything. We're going to send you your Kroger order. That's what we use down here. We're going to send you your Kroger order. You don't even have to do anything, all the way down to, let's say, a $10 a month app. That's the future of healthcare, in my opinion.
I love that. And I think, when I talk to pharmacists about this and healthcare professionals, there is concern that, when will clinicians be replaced by technology? And that's my thing too, is it's not to replace, it's to augment and to be able to serve patients. I love chronic care management programs to where pharmacists or MAs or physicians or APNs can have that monthly check-in with their patients, because 7-minute visits, I think, is the average time that patients are seen in primary care, is simply not enough time to be able to address some of the lifestyle changes that really need to be happening for patients to get the results that we're hoping that they get.
That we've all been a little bit tricked by Meta and the stunts around Zuckerberg's prediction of the future. The reality is, if we look realistically at the trend of technology and user behavior around it and use cases for different things, is that the fear of being replaced by by an algorithm or a computer in any capacity, whatever words people use, it is not grounded in reality, and potentially not grounded in reality for many, many decades. The reality is that AI will be a tool to leverage clinicians to live an amazing lifestyle by helping a ton of people through algorithm-based care that I would term AI assisted. So imagine if you have all of your diabetics and you have 100 people on caseload, and AI assisted is simply something that scans their input for their daily blood sugar reading and identifies the trend for you, which then puts you in the position to have the human-to-human coaching moment without having to pour through 100 people's worth of weekly trend in blood glucose levels. This is the way we need to start thinking about how could I use this technology in the future as a tool, and what would set me up now to best be able to leverage it. Treating algorithmically now, manually, coming up with systems, dialing into a specific niche so you can understand these are the 3 types of people I work with. Here are the 3 different tracks, each of the, okay, there's 9 tracks. This is now thinking algorithmically that one day there will be plug and play AI that allows us to then not take over our jobs, but to make our jobs even easier, higher quality, less errors, higher volume, with also being higher touch, which then allows you to spend less time working. And I'm not talking 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss style. I'm talking 20, 30 hours a week, I think is probably what's actually appropriate, if I were to be honest, for most of us, especially if you have a family or other interests. AI assisted is going to allow all of this to happen so that an army of clinicians can operate in that new way. And that then becomes our next form of healthcare.
Absolutely. And it allows us to connect more deeply. It allows us to have those conversations. One of the things that I hear patients say the most is they don't feel seen. That, they'll say, I don't feel like my physician is really listening to my concerns. They already have an idea in their head of what's going on, or maybe they don't believe me, or they think it's psychosomatic or whatever. And so being able to have that deeper human connection in the times that we do have with our patients, but leveraging the technology to kind of outsource like the time it takes to go through. You can imagine going through all the data of a continuous glucose monitor, the time that would take to spot those trends, to say, what's going on? We notice your blood sugar is peaking at this time and too low at this time. So I agree. It's a fantastic tool, not meant to replace the clinician. What cannot be replaced is that human connection. So final question for you, Frank, for the healthcare professional that's out there, that's watching this, that's like, okay, I'm in this place, I'm in the darkness, there's a lot of things that I would like to change about my career. How do I begin taking the steps to move forward with this idea, to figure out what is my purpose, what is my niche, what is my interest? What advice would you give to that person who's watching this show right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. The advice that one of my mentors passed on to me was very simple: consistent, uncertain action. Mm-hmm. And that if you have an idea of who you want to help already, because in the example you gave, it's, I'm in the darkness, I believe there's a way out, I have an idea, what do I do? Take the first step. And I mean that very tangibly. So everything, I revolve my entire life around my calendar. Gets almost like, why is he going this nitty gritty? Because there's so much motivation on the internet, and there is a place for that. I love listening to it too. I need those injections of motivation too. But what I did in those dark years for too long is motivation not followed by action. And action only happens when you assign time to do the action. So if you're listening to this and you're in that place, I want you to look at next week's calendar and block off time where you are not allowed to do anything else. No notifications, no social media, no scrolling, no emails, no patient work, no family stuff, just you and this idea, and starting to map out what it might look like, what the first steps might be, because without that, this is just a dream.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I live and die by the Google Calendar. And when I was first starting out, it was hard. It was hard to, because I didn't know what to do. I thought scrolling on social media and commenting on people's pages and connecting with people there would move my business forward. What I realized was focusing on having more conversations about what I was doing. I like to say, if you're not talking about your business, you probably don't have a business. So the more you can talk about your ideas in a safe, supportive place, or with a mentor or a trusted advisor, that's not your girlfriend who's never run a business before, or your spouse that has no authority in healthcare. It's working with people who understand what it's like to build a business, how to market yourself, how to brand yourself, and how to take those initial first steps for getting clarity on who your ideal client is for the service. What about your own personal story could you share in order to create that know, like, and trust factor? And how do you differentiate and brand yourself based on your experiences and the things that you've been through? Don't choose diabetes because you think, well, that's got the broadest audience of patients, so I'm going to be a diabetes expert. If that's not what you're passionate about, one of the things that I think is really helpful, look at what personal health challenges you've overcome. Look at what health challenges you've helped family members overcome, and really understand how you going through that can provide a motivation by sharing that with patients or clients, that you really understand where they're at and where they're coming from. That helps build that connection and helps foster the right environment for those healthy, positive changes to be made. So I completely agree, Frank, and I want to just thank you so much for joining us on the Healing Medicine Show and sharing your passion for what you do, and really encouraging healthcare professionals to think about and see themselves in a new light.
Thank you for having me.